Welcome everybody to another episode of the DC New 52 Review. I want to thank you for tuning in. I am your host as always, Pauly DC, and let's get into another one of these things. Today I will review Deathstroke Vol.1. It was titled Legacy, and it was written by Kyle Higgins with art by Joe Bennett and art Thibert, with the first 8 issues being released between November 2011 to June of 2012. Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, hardly needs an introduction. He's one of the coolest and most well-known supervillains in DC Comics, along with being one of my favorites. He first appeared in the New Teen Titans #2 in December 1980 by none other than Marv Wolfman and George Perez. One of the deadliest assassins in the world, he's an expert in all weapons, hand-to-hand combat, espionage, plus he has a genius-level intellect and in most iterations, like here, a healing factor. Going on to be an integral foe to the Teen Titans and arch-enemy to Nightwing, Dick Grayson. Eventually, like all characters to be wildly popular, he would take on other heroes such as Batman, Green Arrow and Black Canary, even the Justice League, when becoming a founding member of the Secret Society of Supervillains. Now, with all that said, believe it or not, this is only the second solo series that he had gotten, with the first being in 1991. So, I think it's time to find out what went down in these pages. Issue number 1 starts in Moscow, where our titular character is referred to as Deathstroke the Terminator, which was part of his original name before a certain groundbreaking movie and its sequel came out, so it was dropped in order to not gain comparisons. But anyway, a Russian named Elsie Kopnek loses his head along with a group of soldiers, and then we briskly move on to the next day where Slade is working with one of his handlers, Christoph, getting his next job and killing a fly Buffy Summer style. If you understand that reference, there's a good chance we can be friends. Slade goes on to meet a trio of young cocky mercenaries, April Hughes and Quinn, who are to accompany him in taking down German arms dealer Jeffrey Bodie or Body, not really sure, who's definitely not Otto Netz. A aerial assault takes place with Deathstroke infiltrating Jeffrey's plane, only to find out he's actually a bioterrorist with a briefcase package waiting since he knew Deathstroke was coming. It's not seen what's inside yet, but Deathstroke's response is a load of C4 blowing up the plane, Jeffrey, and all the freaky monsters inside that were aboard, and he had to fight off. This scene really reminded me of the opening from Hawk and Dove with terrorist Alexander Cork. His monsters even looked like these ones, and I think those two heroes would have been great additions here in my opinion. After all that's done though, the 4 meet up with Christoph so Deathstroke can kill the 3 mercs because he really hates teens apparently. Yes, that's on brand, and yes, that is dark. Christoph is then presented what was in the briefcase, which he claims no knowledge about, while saying Slade is now recently being looked at as a has-been by the assassin community, prompting him to say they have a lot of work to do then. Issue number 2 first has Slade in Los Angeles entering a cliched hidden assassin's bar to meet up with another handler of his, Mikkel, now wanting info on who gave him the Jeffrey Body job, which he passed on to Christoph, but when he doesn't want to say, Slade insists, leading to Mikkel saying he paid a bunch of the people in the place to whack him if he got testy. Quite unfortunate for them, as Deathstroke goes on to kill the colorful cast of characters in a great first extended fight sequence. He didn't even have to use a gun. Mikkel then hauls ass into the souped up Hummer that he came in, which Deathstroke already had rigged to explode, leaving him stranded on a highway where he's flushed out by more explosives, and just when Deathstroke thinks things have gone down too easy, a massive fighter jet equipped with enough guns to excite Charlton Heston shows up. It lays down a ton of bullets, but that just results in dead civilians. Yeesh. A couple goons on motorcycles also came out of the fighter jet, but they lose their heads real quick, leading into the final boss coming out of the aircraft, Road Rage. And although he's got a pretty cool design, he's defeated in about 5 seconds, becoming Roadkill after being launched up and mulched by the fighter jet, which inadvertently cuts Mikhail in two. Something that was done with knowledge was Deathstroke having all this action be publicly witnessed, as Khrushchev finds out when contacting him and being told that there should be lots of work coming his way now. Issue number 3 begins with Deathstroke fighting a foe called Legacy for the first time, which will make sense as this issue goes on, but for now, Legacy is killed and tossed off a roof. Later, Slade is training with a rock'em sock'em robot looking thing as we meet his tough, suave tech guy, Alex, better known as Peabody, like the cartoon dog of the same name produced by Jay Ward. They chat with Khrushchev about the briefcase received in issue number 1, which is still unseen, so Peabody gets looking into it, while Deathstroke goes after philanthropist Elmer Burnham at his base in the Colorado Rockies. On the outside, he rides in on some kind of badass looking snowmobile, collecting more heads, this time of the guards present, and the ones inside don't fare any better, dying in a variety of ways until Legacy 2.0 hits the scene. This version has the same look, but a few new suit enhancements, allowing him to put up a better fight against Deathstroke, and while they do, Elmer thinks that he's gotten away, but is killed by an unknown person. Legacy 2.0 states that he's part of many people hired to kill Deathstroke, except this person now talking cost them their head as they lose focus for a moment, allowing Deathstroke to take use of some very, very conveniently placed sharp objects. Once back with Peabody and Khrushchev, Slade mentions whoever killed Elmer gouged out his left eye, an obvious call out to Mr. Wilson since he too is missing a left eye. More on that to come, since things wrap up here with the extremely rich parents of April, the female merc that Deathstroke killed earlier, and their offering of $20 million for his death, which has led to Legacy 3.0, Mr. Malik, being hired next, taking the suit's mask that the parents totally ripped off from Nobody Morgan Ducard from Batman and Robin Volume 1. Issue number 4 opens on Slade inside a metahuman prison in New Mexico, where the egg-shaped Warden Templeton makes another analogy regarding him being washed up. So he retorts by breaking out of his shackles, murdering 3 guards, and when Templeton is cornered in a cell, regurgitates a bomb like a sick snake so he can shove it in the guy's mouth to blow him up, plus a chunk of the wall that he escapes out of. That is disgusting. Turns out he was just another target, as spoken about to Khrushchev, before Deathstroke goes point break with a random skydive. Peabody then pays Slade a visit later on, while it's seen he's having some sort of hand tremor problem, first popping up during his prison fight, and Peabody has lots of intel on the briefcase contents, which apparently are made of nth metal, a magical alloy that comes from popular DC planet Thanagar. Which is also a good time to mention that in the New 52, Deathstroke's armor is made out of the stuff. But what really matters is, what the hell is in the box already? Oh, well, I'll tell you. The bloodied mask and dagger of Grant Wilson, or Ravager, or one of the 3 children of Slade's that we would see. Rose Wilson in the Superboy series, and Joseph or Jericho later. And let me just say this too. That family has more issues than the Greek gods. Grant is said to be dead, but maybe not, so the only lead that Deathstroke gets involves an old enemy, Laszlo, now Attila, of the Blackhawks, a group of characters that would have done great as mainstays here instead of having their own series. Just saying. Deathstroke goes after Attila in a sweet flying mech suit, chopping up his special aircraft, but the two end up crashing onto some cliffs where they have a standoff with mentions of them having shady past together. Deathstroke had killed his former team, and now Attila and his new team wants Peabody. Things sort of then cut to the last pages wherein Kristoff is stabbed in the eye to death by someone with the same knife as Ravagers. Issue number 5 gives us an opening from years ago with Slade and Kristoff looking over a young Peabody and Grant Wilson training to be killers. I wish the year was more specific, since here it's seen that Slade still has both eyes, but alas, Grant has graduated, now receiving his Ravager mask similar to that of his dad, while Peabody on the other hand decides to go the tech route, presenting his skill to Kristoff, turning his cell phone into a bomb. Too bad for him, a lot of cell phones nowadays do that all on their own. Cutting to the present, Slade is seen cremating Kristoff in one of his tech facilities, and then he heads to a hideout for a brooding ice bath, but Peabody interrupts to discuss Kristoff's death, sparking Slade to realize the knife he was killed with contained a tracker. Peabody quickly piggybacks the signal in order to find out who's on the other end, which takes Deathstroke to some docks where Legacy 3.0 has set him up, beginning a fight that doesn't last long since Mr. Malik under the costume can fly and has super strength, allowing him to drop an entire friggin' submarine on Deathstroke and then yelling about how that was too easy. Yeah, you tell him, Mr. Disposable Bad Guy. There's no way he's actually not dead and is gonna return in the next issue to murder you. No way. Issue number 6 presents us with another flashback featuring Ravager Grant Wilson, showing off that he was quite an efficient killer, but apparently not good enough according to Daddy Deathstroke, saying that he took too long to put down all the people he just did. Tough life. Later on at the Wilson homestead, a glimpse of his wife, the fascinating Adeline Kane, is seen as she speaks to Grant, who then goes on to see Slade, still with both eyes, in the study where he gets a hinting lecture about Achilles and the meaning behind his story. Ravager's Achilles heel looked to be a character called Midnighter, one that became a favorite of mine thanks to the New 52, which you can tell it's him by his recognizable chin spike. And he seemed to kill Grant, Death in the Family, Jason Todd style. Back in the present, Deathstroke's beaten body is pulled from the water and viciously tossed around by Legacy 3.0, who then goes on to nearly hack off one of Deathstroke's arms with his own sword. The counterattack is an explosive plastered on Legacy 3.0 in order for Deathstroke to set up an electromagnetic pulse trap, rendering the suit Mr. Malik is in useless, leaving him paralyzed inside. Slade then finally finds out here that the whole Legacy thing was due to April the Merc's parents, but what he doesn't know now is Grant is still alive and working with them. Dun dun dun. I'll quickly mention here that this Ravager version, Grant Wilson, was created in the New Teen Titans #1, 1980 by George Perez, Marv Wolfman, and Romeo Tangal. Issue number 7 kicks off with Peabody somehow finding Deathstroke among tons of wreckage. No tech, no info, just beats all the dozens of cops and firemen to it. Then they somehow sneak away with zero interaction, even though Deathstroke is half dead. They make it to a vehicle where inside Slade mentions Legacy 3.0 is now floating, aka dead, and then is told where April's parents are, just outside of Chicago. So instead of getting medical attention, he hits a weapon stash in order to go after Grant, now figuring out that he's involved with everything. A fact that could have been sussed out earlier when it said no one should have had the ability to find Kristoff, except maybe the highly trained son of the guy's top associate who he knew for years. Once on location and barely defending himself, Deathstroke meets up with Grant face to face for the first time in years, ushering in a huge fight between the two, which is kinda like a deconstruction and metaphor for this entire first story. Legacy, reputation, and desire to be remembered and recognized in legendary status, all being snuffed out by ego and the inevitable. As Grant starts to win the fight, he goes on to explain how easy it was to set up the legacy thing which started all this. Oof, man oh man. Your own son planned on you killing a teen, Slade. Boy, that's dark. Just when it looks like Grant is about to usurp his father, the Harmonies, their last name was finally stated earlier, step in to incapacitate him since they don't like being used. Things then get real tense when the couple say that they'll let Deathstroke off the hook if he kills Grant. A bullet to both of them would have done you much better because Deathstroke surprise kills them with his last bit of energy, even though Miss Harmony missed him at point blank range due to being such a shit shot. Come on, woman, he was right in front of you! Grant then has his dad totally dead to rights, but decides to now spare him. Oof, that was how you write a good finale. Issue number 8 kinda reads like an epilogue, and it's presented in 2 parts. The first shows a very young Slade growing up with his abusive small-time hood father, Nathaniel Wilson, who had aspirations to join the mob. And he would bring Slade along on his degenerate ventures, but he ended up ultimately getting on the wrong side of mafia boss Rossi, so he resorts to giving up his son for a mere 10 grand so the crew of Mr. Rossi can take him. And judging by the look of this guy Rossi, Slade definitely got, yeah. Oh my. The second half has current Slade waking up in the care of Nurse Hemingway after his recent Darth Vader vs. Luke episode, and once the recovery is complete, he gets right back to work, picking up a job from a handler involving some whack job called Kill Switch. And after a semi-quick fight, Deathstroke takes him out by blowing up the low-rent building he's in, while still inside himself. He then emerges, having counted on his healing factor and durability to keep him alive. Out of all the scenarios to eliminate this guy, and you land on that one? Really? You're supposed to be one of the deadliest assassins on Earth. I don't know, and I don't care. There's a bit of a Kill Bill moment reminiscent of Uma Thurman and Vivica A. Fox's daughter next. And later, Slade has one last get-together with Peabody to tell him that killing people is the only thing that makes him happy. Shocker. Finally, we see that he's keeping his barely alive father cooped up Stephen King's Misery style, so he can drop by to torment and berate him Gus Fring style. Old Nathaniel even kinda looks like Hector Salamanca. Yes, I'm pretty good at making references to things. Alright. I'll say this first regarding the plot because the Volume 2 took the character in a much different direction. So this opening book can pretty much be treated as a standalone story, and along with Nightwing, writer Kyle Higgins nailed them both. And I thought this was actually for a possible crossover, but these two never really came into contact, even with their long history. That actually brings me to another part about the characters who did show up. I've said it before, less can be more, and seeing the Blackhawks here had me thinking they could have done much better in a series like this instead of their own. Even with Midnighter's cameo, who did do well in Stormwatch, it was another case of a plot hint that went nowhere. Sigh. Getting back to what we did have here, I was glad no heavy-hitting main DC characters were involved. It gave Deathstroke a chance to really be the main focus, while taking a very believable and very real threat in a slightly reworked Ravager, who I'm quite surprised didn't make more New 52 appearances. There was no shortage of goonish enemies and freakish fight scenes, which I'm sure core fans surely appreciated, with Deathstroke collecting more heads than a guillotine during the French Revolution. The artwork has everything a title like this should have: well laid out action sequences, a nice, sharply designed main character, a complement of interior and exterior settings. Joe Bennett's art is large yet always stays in charge, with no one or thing looking unrealistic, plus the color and ink work is superb. There's almost like an ominous haze is ever present. Now, for dialogue, I gotta mention this quick. The name Christoph is spelled CR sometimes and others CH. Not really sure what happened there, but moving on. I've always thought writing a character of this stature is a bit challenging. The smartest, the deadliest, the most ancient. How can they be presented in truly accurate manner with what info can be obtained from reality? With what we got here, it was mostly just the narration of a cold-blooded killer who gets great satisfaction from what he does. Bits of cunning were heard, but not enough to write home about. Peabody and Grant didn't really have enough page time to speak on anything either. I absolutely will say that this is one of those times that I wished a writer stuck around just a little longer. That will be everything for today's review though, so if you have watched until the end here, I want to personally thank you for that, and to please like, share, and subscribe. Please follow me on all my social media platforms, and to please join me next time for Batwoman Volume 1.